Oh, okay. Oh, hello.
Hey, sorry guys, I had a little technical difficulty there going live. Tried to request it once, but anyway, thanks so much for having me on, and sorry for keeping you all for a second.
No, you're totally good. Thank you so much for coming. We're really excited to chat with you today, and really excited that you're running again for office. So as we mentioned earlier, to everyone watching, this is Suraj Patel. He's running for Congress in New York's 12th District. We are the Jikaria sisters. I'm Amika.
I'm Rishika. And I'm Ashika.
Yeah, and we're really excited to have Suraj here today. There's been a lot going on over the past few weeks, and of course, our platform started with us dancing and making TikToks and all of that, but it's really become something more. We're really trying to encourage people to get involved and civically engaged. So we're really excited to spread this message a little bit further. So we have some questions that we wanted to ask Suraj to get to know a little bit more about him. But before we do that, maybe Suraj, you want to just quickly introduce yourself to everyone that's watching?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you again for having me on, guys. By the way, I mentioned to my cousins that are big fans of yours on TikTok. I do a lot of Bollywood dancing, that I was doing this today, and they were so psyched. It's like the most psyched they've been for this campaign in 3 years. But anyway, thanks for having me on. Guys that are tuning in, I'm Suraj Patel. I'm a Democratic candidate for U.S. Congress in New York City, on the eastern half of Manhattan, and then a little bit of North Brooklyn and Western Queens. I'm an attorney. I'm a professor of business ethics at NYU. And I once worked for the greatest president of our lifetimes, Barack Obama. And then more importantly, I think, and we want to get into it, I know today, I'm actually the son of Naina and Champak Patel, two immigrants who moved from India with the rest of their family with absolutely nothing in their pockets. And the reason I bring that up is because literally every single thing I do, every waking moment is colored by the experience of growing up as a first-generation American in a multilingual, bicultural, setting. And I know that's a lot of what you want to get into, but I think this moment when millions of people are marching every single day to bring change, this moment calls for leaders with that kind of experience, with a whole different type of vision for what it means to be American and what it's going to take to dismantle systemic oppression in our systems and to make our country more fair, more equal, more free.
Yeah, thank you so much for introducing yourself. I think growing up as Gujarati Americans in New York City, we were all born and raised in Brooklyn. We were kind of in a similar situation as you are. And so we kind of like to get to know more about how you decided to go into law and then eventually, run for Congress.
Really great question. So my family, my first memories are of a bodega that we used to run out in Bloomfield, New Jersey, just on the other side of the river. And my dad was an MTA engineer. And when we used to sleep, 13 of us in a one-bedroom apartment above the place that we were running. And so at that point, it was like, how could you possibly get to here? And I get the question all the time. I'll tell you why I personally got into politics. So growing up, you can imagine you're we moved to Indiana for part of my childhood where I grew up, and it was 100% white. And I think my brothers and I were the only diversity in our entire school system. We didn't have a single black student. We didn't have a single Hispanic student. We didn't have a single Asian student, just 4 Indian boys, and then everybody else. And you're always sort of kind of straddling between trying to overcompensate for how American you are, how much you belong, and especially in an environment like that. Like when I was a kid, my parents used to take us to the lake every year, and like a big reservoir, and we would be like 13 or 14 people on a pontoon boat with a stove to make khichdi on a pontoon boat. But my parents were scared to death of water, so everyone was forced to wear a life jacket the entire time. And it's like, why are we doing vacations where you're terrified for 12 hours a day? It's because they wanted to also make sure that we did all the American things you could. And so with that sort of early sort of mindset, politics is a really interesting way to feel like you belong. It's a place where your peers select you as a representative. And there's nothing more, it seems, the more proof to show that you're part of this country and this story than to have your peers select you to represent them. And so I was always interested from that standpoint personally. I went to law school because I was interested in the law and the like I said, the systemic changes we need in this country. But within a year of law school, I was so psyched about the Obama campaign that I dropped everything, much to my parents' dismay, who thought I'd never go back and finish, and went to Colorado and just started knocking on doors for Barack Obama. And a few months in, they asked me if I would go do advance, and I started traveling around the country with the team and doing events, and I got to see how incredible a campaign, when it's positive and optimistic and visionary and hopeful for the future, can be. And we haven't seen something like it up until now, and we haven't seen something, I hadn't seen anything like it up until then or since then. And I'll give you one last great Obama story moving forward. In 2015, I was asked to join the White House advance team because the president went to India for the Republic Day celebration, and they wanted somebody who could speak Hindi and be part of that team. So I went 20 days early and helped sort of run that trip. And I got to do the site that I was ahead of was President Obama's visit to Rajghat, where Gandhiji's memorial place is. And it's so special to think about the fact that the son of two people who left India with almost nothing was there with the President of the United States at the memorial place where he was laying a wreath and sprinkling flowers and planting a tree. I watered that tree. I watered the tree that President Obama planted at Gandhiji's burial site, and then I get to fly back on Air Force One. That is a testament to the power of education, of opportunity, of mobility in this country, and that someone can do that in one lifetime. And that's the kind of politics we need to come back to.
Yeah, I mean, it's so great that we get to see a South Asian American in running for office. I think that's so cool. Especially growing up, we could relate to a lot of the stories that you just shared. It's definitely super relatable. I guess as a person of color in this country, what are some of the obstacles you faced as you were, starting your political campaign?
Sorry. Okay, sorry. Say it again. My bad. Go ahead.
I was just saying that it's very relatable with being a South Asian American and Indian American in this country. What were some of the obstacles you faced when you were, running for office and starting?
It's hard. It's hard. There's no instruction manual, and you certainly make mistakes, and you certainly get held to a different standard. I think that's more than evident than other folks in terms of. I feel like in the Democratic Party, especially. There's this feeling in New York that we don't need anything. We don't need to fix anything. That it's the Republicans that are the problem. Oh, if the Republicans in Ohio voted the right way, we'd be fine. And we saw with the Central Park Amy just a few weeks ago how much work we had to do in New York itself, in some of the most quote unquote liberal parts of the country. And you find it from media treatment. You find it from from sort of the way the political class looks at someone who steps out of their lane. People are very happy going to fundraisers with Indian Americans, but the same people seem really, really offended when you run for office against somebody that they think is acceptable. And I think people have a right to a choice. And that's what we provided, but it's certainly, it's harder. And I'm sure you face that double standard in a lot of occasions because you're not sort of viewed as somebody that's in the right lane.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point that you bring up, especially about, New York being so diverse. And when you think of New York City, especially, you think it's very liberal. But then we see that there are still places where the system is broken and there's still a lot of improvement to be made. So that's another reason why it's really great to see someone who is South Asian American running.
It's so wild to think about it this way. In New Jersey, there's, I think, 4 state assembly members that are of Indian American or South Asian origin. There's an attorney general, statewide elected. There's some senators. In New York, out of the 400 or so city councilmen in New York, plus state senators, plus general assembly people, last year was the first time an Indian American person was elected to the state senate. And is currently, there's 1 out of 400 people. There's not even a city councilor in New York City right now, in the most diverse city in the world, that is of Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan, or Nepali origin. That's crazy. we would make history, in 11 days, and then winning in November, assuming we win in November, by electing the first South Asian to federal office anywhere east of Chicago. And that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, it's really exciting. And your story particularly, it resonates with me a lot because I'm actually starting law school this fall. And last summer, I was able to intern with a political consulting firm based in New York. So I got to work on some local campaigns, and it was really my first experience working on campaigns and doing like the door knocking and the phone banking and working with campaign finances. So it's really great to see that. And I guess my question for you, and I'm sure a lot of other people probably have this question, is what advice would you give to someone who is a young South Asian American who is interested in going into politics one day?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're doing exactly the right thing. Like, first off, experience matters, and getting legal experience and going to law school, that's a fantastic signal to be sending about your seriousness of purpose. I think it's also really important for people. Like I say, I think everyone should join and do a campaign at least once in their lives, because there's nothing that is more the camaraderie, the team building, the energy, the adrenaline of working with, 50, 60 people who are so passionate about something, relatively young usually, because that's what campaigns attract. It's hard to describe the feeling of how much people get into a campaign, especially a good campaign, towards the end of it, and how much you learn so quickly. And so I'd say no matter what, if you're thinking about this, like, pick a candidate at any level, pick a race, and throw yourself fully into it. See what it's like. In my case, it was, I worked for a mayor's re-elect once. It was fine, but then it was the Obama campaign in 2008 that really got me juiced up. And then 2012, I did the Obama campaign again, and it was super exciting and inspiring. And then I worked for Hillary Clinton in 2016 at the end in the general election for a few months. And that was devastating. I mean, but you get so into it. And in that case, when we were normally like, the world's going to end if we lose. And it did. It kind of did, didn't it? So it was, the stakes get high, but you should definitely jump in.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think, as you mentioned, that passion, that drive, that work ethic that goes behind campaigns is really, it's such a great experience to be in. I know when I had the opportunity to do it, it was amazing to like get, behind one common goal and really push that forward. So thanks for giving that advice. And I guess just kind of like a follow-up question off of that is, I know the importance of voting when it comes to, you can run a very successful campaign, but at the end of the day, voters need to turn out, they need to come and vote. So I know we've been reading a lot, and we kind of found some statistics, and Asian Americans, although they definitely make up one of the larger racial groups in the U.S., they have some of the lower voter turnout rates. So I was wondering, why do you think that is the case, and what can we do as Asian Americans, specifically South Asian Americans, to increase that voter turnout?
I think you're doing it right now. I think you're using your platform to remind people to vote. I think typically young people generally don't vote at the levels that older people do, and that's part of the biggest problem with our politics, that at these local and state levels, all the things we're marching about, with criminal justice reform and police brutality, the bulk of that stuff happens at the city level. And those election turnouts are so low that, the impact of your vote is significant. If you really care about Black Lives Matter, like, you need to vote at the city council and mayor level every single time, where your vote really matters and where those policies especially are really effective. And for South Asians, we have dual problems. We don't just have a voting problem, we have a participation problem overall, and even our census levels of filling out the census are some of the lowest in the country, or in the of all demographics. And that means we're being undercounted and underrepresented. If you wonder why there are no South Asians in office, because people don't even know we're in this country, that Queens is going to lose a congressional seat next cycle, very simply because only 70% of South Asians are filling out their census forms. So the work you guys are doing to get people educated in these primaries, June 23rd, by the way, and people who want to vote by mail, you can vote now by requesting your ballot at votejune23.com. Those are the kinds of things that are super essential. And I think it's not enough to just tell people to vote. You got to give them a reason why to vote. And in this case, we're looking at a decision between one of the biggest corporate PAC money recipient Democrats in Congress, but also one of the biggest architects of mass incarceration. Someone who voted for every bad crime bill since the early 90s and applauded the ability for the federal government to jail undocumented immigrants, applauded, mandatory minimums for juveniles, things like that. So if you really care about these issues, we have to sort of signal at these primary levels to like replace these folks. The people who had a hand in creating the systems of incarceration, of oppression, don't really have any business dismantling them. They had decades to do it. So I think that like pairing a vote message with a reason to is very important. It can't be like rock the vote, right? It can't be simply because there's a concert you're going to go vote. You have to give people a reason.
Absolutely, yeah, we definitely agree, and we think that a lot of the momentum that started in the past few weeks will hopefully encourage people to show up and to continue to be involved. We're nervous that everything that's been going on, we don't want it to die out. We really want to make sure that people stay involved. So I think the points you brought up are really great. And then the last question we have for you is around the idea of evidence-based policymaking. So this is very near and dear to my heart. I used to work in evidence-based policy space, so I feel very passionately about it, and we're reading about how you care about that too. So if you were to be elected to office, what areas would you focus on first, looking through to using evidence-based policy?
In public policy from Cambridge University, and one of the reasons I did that is because they were focusing heavily on evidence-based policy for a master's, very statistics-oriented and math and science, which is why I chose that program. The COVID crisis, even before it, my team and I were writing a plan to increase federal research and development to space race levels. So back during the Apollo days, we spent 2% of our GDP on federal research and development. That number for the last 2 decades is like 0.7%. That's about a $300 billion per year gap of stuff that we could be discovering that we're not. From vaccines to pandemics to climate change and mitigation, we are not going to get out of these messes that we've created or that are thrust upon us without innovating. And I'll give you a stat, 22% of NIH grants are accepted. So if you know someone who writes a grant for research at the National Institutes of Health, 78% of the time they don't get that grant because there's not enough money. Think about that. 78% of things that could have been discovered around exactly the things that that we lacked during COVID, like testing, like vaccines, aren't there and we'll never know. So I'm a huge proponent of increased scientific research budget, and then on every other policy as well, whether that's looking at harm reduction for things that have unintended consequences. Like, you need to look at the evidence and course correct. You shouldn't just be ideological about your choices. And it doesn't hurt that I'm running against a person who is a leading anti-vaccine advocate in Congress for 15 years. That's part of the reason I'm in this race. So I think if you want to make that kind of change, then it has to happen from here. And our district, by the way, y'all, is the most educated in the country. We have 78% of the district is college educated, and we have hospitals that lead the world all up and down the East River in our district. And we ought to have a representative who respects that, empowers that, and frankly uses that in its policymaking,
Yeah, that's really amazing to hear. We definitely need more of that data and that science backing up policy decisions. So really excited to have you running on that. Great. So we are mostly wrapped up with our questions. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or you would like to get the message out about?
No, I want to just, again, thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing. This is such a huge help for everyone. It's good help for democracy. It's an incredible moment for the world right now. You can feel it. There's a palpable energy for change. People are going to remember just going to remember 2020 for the rest of their lives, considering we were all locked in our homes for 8 weeks of it. And then considering the country erupted in mass civil protests, the world did, frankly. And let it be a year where in June, in the middle of the year, we decided in the first consequential election since COVID, since Black Lives, erupted, that we no longer will take it. We're the biggest generation in American history, and we have the voting power to change our future and change the next decade. Please encourage everyone to vote this June 23rd in New York's primary. Go online, request a ballot, vote from home, vote in person. Early vote starts tomorrow. It's ample ways to do it. None of us have much to do since our jobs are probably still work from home. So please encourage everyone to get out there and do it. And thank you, girls, ladies, for doing this with me. And congratulations on law school and all the success you guys have. I know one of you is at Georgia Tech, and I know one of you went to Georgetown SFS. By the way, freshman year I was a Georgetown SFS student until I transferred to Canada. Yeah. And keep it up on TikTok.
Yeah, well, thank you so much again, Suraj, for joining us. Really grateful that you were able to make time. And everyone, please remember to vote and stay involved. Again, it's really nice to see another